Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are breaking down a really big idea from neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky. His argument that free will, something we feel is central to who we are, is actually a complete illusion. Okay, let's start with something super simple. Picture it. You're at an ice cream shop. You look at the flavors, and you pick one. Vanilla. Feels like a choice, right? The most basic kind of free will. You decided. But here's where Sapolsky flips the script. He says the interesting question isn't what you chose. It's how you became the kind of person who would choose vanilla in the first place. And that answer, he argues, has absolutely nothing to do with freedom. And that question takes us right to the heart of his big idea, a concept called determinism. So what does that mean? Well, think of it like a line of dominoes that stretches back forever. Every single thing that happens, every thought you have, every action you take is just the next domino falling, knocked over by the one before it. There's not a single crack in that chain of cause and effect where a you that's independent of everything else can just pop in and make a free choice. Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this play out in the real world? Well, let's look at a pretty startling example that shows just how powerful these hidden forces can be. So researchers dug into over 1,000 parole decisions. They wanted to know what's the one thing that best predicts if a prisoner gets out. You'd think, right, it's got to be the crime or their behavior, maybe a really compelling case. Well, it was none of those. It turns out the single biggest factor was how long it had been since the judge had a meal. Seriously, if your case came up right after lunch, your chances of getting parole shot way up, compared to someone whose case was heard right before the judge's stomach started rumbling. And here's the kicker. If you ask the judges why they made their decisions, they'd give you all these perfectly logical, philosophical reasons. They'd quote law books. They'd never, ever say, well, my blood sugar was a little low and my frontal cortex was getting cranky. They had no idea. They created stories to explain a choice that was really being driven by their biology. And that hungry judge effect? That's just the very last domino to fall in an incredibly long, complex chain of causes. It's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, think about any decision. 1 second before you make it, specific neurons fire in your brain. Hours before that, your hormone levels and blood sugar are doing their thing. Years before that, your childhood, your culture, all your life experiences were shaping your preferences. And even before you were born, your genes and the environment inside the womb were already setting the stage. There's just no starting point where an independent you jumps in. And this really gets to the heart of Sapolsky's argument. He says we are literally nothing more than our biology, which we didn't choose, interacting with an environment that we also didn't choose. Okay, I know what some of you might be thinking. What about quantum mechanics or chaos theory? Doesn't all that randomness at the subatomic level open up a little window for free will to sneak in? Well, Sapolsky has answers for that. For one, he argues quantum effects are just way, way too small to have any impact on how a neuron fires. But even if they could, what would that give you? Randomness, not freedom. A random choice isn't a willed choice. It's just a coin flip. That's not the same thing as making a conscious, deliberate, moral decision. All right, so if we accept this, even for a moment, what are the consequences? What does this mean for how we live our lives, for how we structure society? This is where things get really interesting, moving from the science to what it means to be human. Sapolsky argues we're actually already heading down this road. Just look at history. We used to think epilepsy was demonic possession. Now we know it's a neurological disorder. We used to call dyslexia laziness. Now we understand it's about brain wiring. We are slowly but surely replacing blame with biology. And every single time we've done that, every time we've swapped blame for a biological understanding, the world has become a more humane, more compassionate place. So this isn't some depressing, fatalistic idea. For Sapolsky, it's actually liberating. Okay, so let's really imagine it. What would a world that fully accepts this idea, what would it actually look like? Well, it would be a massive shift. We'd move away from systems built on punishment and blame or reward and merit. Instead, we'd build a society based on understanding and compassion. Think quarantine instead of punishment, and restoration instead of reward. I mean, hating someone for something they did would start to feel as, well, illogical as hating an earthquake for causing destruction. The person, just like the storm, is simply the outcome of a million forces they had no control over. Now, the first question everyone asks is, So we just let dangerous people run wild? And the answer is a hard no. That is not what this is about at all. It's about separating the action from the judgment. We absolutely have to protect society from harm. But think about it. We quarantine a child with the flu to stop it from spreading. We don't blame or punish the kid for getting sick. We can do the same for people who are dangerous. We restrain them to keep others safe, but we do it without that heavy layer of moral blame. But the really tough part of all this isn't about forgiving other people. The toughest challenge is looking in the mirror. It's accepting that our own successes, that promotion, that amazing work ethic, weren't really earned by some independent us. It means accepting that we are also the product of a massive biological and environmental lottery, and we just happen to get lucky. And that's really the question to chew on, isn't it? If you are not the author of your actions, but the sum of your entire history, how does that change the way you see yourself? And how does it change the way you see everyone else? What happens when we finally truly swap blame for understanding?